Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We're bringing you Warrior Wednesday today. And what's interesting is we have Warrior Creed. We got warriorcreed.us's Randy Watt. I'm really glad to have him come on. We're gonna jump right in this. Before we do that, be sure and always go to iowafc.org. We need your membership. Check out our trusted partners there. People who are investing are offering you tangible discounts and goods off their services. Support these people. Join the organization. And oh, by the way, if you haven't stopped over to the store at iowafc.org and be redirected to Brownells, where you can pick up 9-line shirts that are IFC stuff, be sure and do that. And when you make it to Brownells, you'd be wise if you throw a few other things in your cart. So, with no further ado, Randy Watt, thank you so much for coming on today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's delve into the conversation.
Sure. I spent 36 years with the Ogden Police Department in Ogden, Utah. Last 4 years as chief, and a long time in SWAT, a long time in the firearms training unit. Grew up in a firearms family, so that kind of moved naturally. At the same time, I started out in the airborne infantry, and the Utah Army National Guard has the headquarters and a battalion of the 19th Special Forces Group. So I enlisted in the 19th Special Forces Group, and was an enlisted weapons sergeant, and then demolition sergeant, or an engineer sergeant. Then after about 9 years, 8.5 years as an enlisted soldier, I had the requisite surgery and became an officer, and continued on in my career. I spent 33 years, 10 months to the day in the Army National Guard, the 19th Special Forces Group. Started as a private and retired as a colonel commanding the group. Multiple trips to the war, Afghanistan and Iraq, a year at the Army War College. Along the way in both those careers, picked up a couple of master's degrees. But I developed a great deal of experience in training, and I studied training and adult learning. Have literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of structured training, and I've been an instructor at a variety of things for a number of years. Including in my own agency, but also Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat School. I was the first instructor in the Utah Army National Guard. That program, that's something that really changed, really made a huge difference within the Green Beret community, active duty and National Guard. That was a result of General Boykin, who came out of Delta, and when General Boykin became the commander of the United States Army Special Forces Command, he said, look, we need to upgrade our people. There's absolutely no reason that our standard Green Berets aren't pretty close to as proficient with their firearms as Delta operators are. And so for about 2 years we studied, and I was a representative on that group. And we put together the Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat course, which is a requirement. Every Green Beret has to go through it every so often and recertify. Incredible course. And then over the years, I got the opportunity to train with, because of both careers, some of the most named instructors that people can attend with. And I also attended Gunsight a number of times, and ended up going on staff there, going through their 2-year instructor program, and becoming an instructor at Gunsight, starting in 2005. And then about 5 years ago, I became a range master there. I do about 8 or 9 weeks a year down at Gunsight. I have my own companies, SRW Incorporated, and Warrior Creed. And Warrior Creed focuses on civilian training, for firearms training and tactical training for civilians. Do a lot of stuff related to, because of the Special Forces background and experience, do a lot of stuff related to security, active shooter. SRW Incorporated is a consulting firm, and we work with school districts. This week I'm headed to Wisconsin to work with a very large church to improve their active shooter and defense programs and processes. Looking forward to that. And then we work with some corporate clients, everything from some Fortune 500s all the way down to startups. Everything from security and security-related activities to strategic leadership. So we do a lot, and I get to enjoy the avails of two great careers that ran simultaneously.
Wow. I'm not sure where to go from there. There's a lot to unpack, man. Well, okay, I'm gonna crib something from a shameless plug from the movie Full Metal Jacket. So, were you wanting to be the first kid on your block to have a confirmed kill as an 8-year-old boy, or what led down this path?
So, I grew up in the home of a war hero. My father was a war hero. My father grew up in Kansas, through the Depression, and along comes World War II. My father wanted to be a pilot, and so U.S. is getting ready to go into the war, World War II, and Dad went down to the U.S. Army Air Corps there, and he was 19, and they said you have to be 21, you have to have a college degree. So Dad said, fine. He went up to Canada and became a pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And most people don't know this, but about 36,000 Americans served in World War II in the Canadian Armed Forces. And so he flew Wellington bombers, was shot down on his 18th bombing mission over Germany. Shot down over Germany. The bombing mission was the railhead in Sicily. And was captured. Spent 2.5 years in German prison camp, Stalag Luft 3, participated in something called the Great Escape, and did not make it out the tunnel. He was in the second group that was supposed to go out. In the first group, of course, we all know what happened there. But later, when they were being moved into Germany, the Stalag Luft 3 was in Sagen, Poland. When they were getting ready, they were being moved. He jumped off a train and was able to escape E&E south through Germany and escaped and was repatriated, came home. And he spent his whole life in the aviation industry. And there weren't a lot of jobs in the United States after World War II for pilots. And so he went back to Canada and he spent his whole life there. I was born and raised in Canada to U.S. parents. And when I graduated high school, went to college up there in Alberta for a couple of years, and then moved to the States to get more education. Ended up on the Ogden Police Department. And this is going to date me, but I hired on the Ogden Police Department in August of 1979. So interestingly enough, this plays into some of what we're talking about. This was pre-Tennessee versus Garner, the fleeing felon, to change the fleeing felon rule. This was pre-Connor. And so the use of force rules that changed in 1983 in Graham versus Connor. So I come from the fleeing felon era. If you were a felon, it didn't matter what it was for. If you fled from us, we could shoot you. My first law enforcement shooting was in 1981, and so through that time there was a lot of change going on. And as a result of these experiences and expertise and education, I do expert testimony work protecting law enforcement officers and agencies. I usually have 4 or 5 cases going all the time. And that understanding of use of force, and that's something I want to talk about today for the civilian world, because they don't understand, and not very many instructors are doing a very good job of preparing people for the real turmoil, the real event that's going to occur if they ever have to use force of any sort to defend themselves.
I'm glad that we're going to talk about that. I had a discussion today, gosh, Randy, it's just been a couple hours ago, with a gentleman who was talking about a social media influencer that he had signed on with to help promote and his product and whatever else. And this guy, it might give it away a little bit. I'm not too concerned about whether he likes me or doesn't like me. I don't really worry about things like that. He is known for walking over to a gun safe, opening this thing up, and there are rows and rows and rows of all different kinds of handguns that you can possibly imagine. I mean, it's like a smorgasbord. It's like there's like $250,000 worth of items in there, right? And he'll say something like, well, on today's version of what am I going to carry? And he'll randomly pick one and stick it in his holster and off he walks, And I was talking with this gentleman about it. He's like, what do you think about it? I'm really excited about this. And I said, I don't know if I'd be very excited about that at all. And he's like, well, why not? He's got a lot of followers. He can help me. I said, well, yeah, he can put you in front of people. But I said, do you really believe that it's wise to say, I'm just going to randomly pick a carry gun today and go use it? I said, I'm a gunsmith by trade. I'm looking at the things that he's got in there. I said, they're all different sizes and configurations. I said, they're talking about decocker models, safety models, external safeties, internal safeties, hammer fired guns, striker fired guns, all different manner of whatever are in there. And I said, I think I could probably argue he may not be truly proficient, or there's a question you can make about his proficiency with any one of them, much less randomly grabbing one for the purposes of defending one's life or potentially taking somebody else's. I'm like, I think that's the wrong message to send. I don't think it's particularly responsible. It's marketable, but I said, I don't think it's very responsible. And I said, to be honest with you, I wouldn't bring him on staff. Not if that was the posture. And maybe, Randy, I have to concede. Maybe it's just marketing fluff, and that's designed to elicit a response. Maybe that isn't really what's happening. But if it was, I would tell you, I think that's unwise. So, and I think it's going to lead into some of the things that I sense that you're going to talk about. So walk us through the ramifications of making these choices. I think that's where you're headed.
Yeah. Hang on just 1 second. I forgot to let a dog out. And
All right.
Strictly from a performance view first, right? Let's talk about that strictly from a performance view first. And that is, we create neural pathways in terms of response, right? So axons carry the signals from neurons, and that's how we physically perform. And when we talk about myelination, and we talk about the thickening of the sheath, myelin being the sheath on axons, and we talk about how we reach automaticity in terms of performance. We're tying together a whole bunch of physical performance factors. Everything from how our body senses the weight, the difference in a pistol as we present the pistol, to how we position it, the body sensing and doing all the things, to how we're pressing the trigger in an automated response, right? So let's say we're using a strike-fired pistol, and it has a certain travel length and has a certain weight of trigger, right? We're going to continue pressing that. We're going to work with that. We're going to on and on and on. And our brain is going to say, this is how that happens. And then we change triggers, right? Let's say we go to a DA SA pistol, and we're going to confound the process that is occurring, because the brain is going to sense the difference in that long, heavy trigger pull, not in an effective way, but it's going to cause the brain to blink, let's say, in terms of our performance. Something is different here, all right? We have a pace, we have a tempo, right? Under pressure, whether we're using a shot clock and so on and so forth, to build that response, that automaticity in terms of response. And the way the brain, everything's about the brain. It's all based in. And so we have this rhythm and tempo as we press the trigger, right? Up close, we can press fast, because we're tying this flash sight picture to the weapon's positioning in terms of our physiological position, both of the pistol and ourselves in relation to the target. And then there's, in that automated sequence, the trigger press is going to happen at that specific point in time. Whereas as we add distance, we're going to refine a little longer. As we become skilled, we're going to refine. When I say longer, I'm not talking long. I'm just talking a little bit of difference in time. We're going to refine that sight picture, or refine that dot placement through that trigger press. And the tempo of the trigger press is going to be, particularly if we had significant difference in distance, that the timing on that and the tempo of that trigger press are going to be different in order to achieve our levels of accuracy, right?
Yep.
When we are accessing and using, oh, today I'll carry this pistol, or tomorrow I'll carry that pistol, or you know, this will look good with my boots today. When we're doing those kinds of things, we're literally degrading the physical performance things that we would build. Now, solution-wise, I'm a big fan of a family of firearms, right? For a number of years, you know, rightly or wrong, it's just my personal preference, was Glocks. And everything and as Glock, you know, I got my first Glock issued to me in 1988. We were 586 Smiths revolvers up to then in the police department, and then we went to Glocks, Gen 1 Glocks in 9mm, and then we went to Glock 22s and 40 cal, and 20. We had 17s and 19s, Gen 1s, and then we went to the 22s and 23s and 40 when 40 was supposed to be the caliber, and so on, right? And so, but over time, what happened is, on duty, I could carry a full size. In plain clothes, I could carry a mid-size. Off duty, I could carry a compact, subcompact. I could carry like the 43X. System's the same. All the switches are in the same place. Trigger press is the same, right? So based on need, I have this family of firearms where I'm not confounding the principles and processes of good accuracy and training and combining those things to produce specified results. You know, I shoot a lot. I shoot, you know, 25, 30,000 rounds a year, both in instruction and in personal training. Triggers make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Weight, balance make a difference. How my body senses what I'm doing with, whether it's a pistol, whether it's a carbine, whether it's a shotgun, you know, tactical type shotgun. Those things make differences. You know, is weight forward makes a difference in how I manipulate the firearm, or how my brain and my body react together to manage the firearm, to manage the system, and to employ it efficiently and effectively. So, and as I tell people, you know, find your firearm, find it for the right reasons. As you know, the number one criteria is, does it fit well? There are a significant number of shooters who are shooting guns that don't fit well, and they're never going to master that pistol if they don't have a good fit. And there are ways to do that. So,
okay, this is probably a good time to talk about this, because I think it's largely misunderstood for newcomers. And honestly, Randy, I think there are a lot of people who've been doing it for a while that still don't understand it. When you talk about fit, that's different than feel. I have been in the big box stores, and I have been in some of these gun shops where, you know, you're standing around minding your own business and you're listening to counter folk stand there, and somebody will walk up and they're like, "Hey, put this in your hand. How does it feel?" And undoubtedly there'll be somebody unsuspecting, and this isn't a hack on Walther. Okay, it's not. But there'll be somebody as unsuspecting that's handed something straight out of one of the James Bond movies. And it's smooth and it's contoured. Oh, this is fantastic. And you know, and they box it up and send it home. And I'm thinking, 380 probably would not have been my choice. I don't know how they're going to do a magazine change, you know, with any speed. And oh, by the way, it's likely the first time that they shoot this incorrectly, the slide will cut their thumb almost off, you know, and that'll be the last time they ever touch a firearm. So it's not about feel, it's about fit. So it's truly about ergonomics. Does your finger fall in the right place on the trigger? Can you operate the controls without having to manipulate your hand around on the grip? All these other things. And I don't see that being done very often. And I'm concerned about what people are buying, because it may feel okay, like maybe a new pair of shoes, but when you walk a mile in the shoes, in this gun, so to speak, you may be darn sorry. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, that's absolutely, you know, correct. Fit, it is physiological, right? Feel is psychological. So, you know, this feels good. Well, what does that mean? I don't have a clue if it feels good to you, but I can tell you if it fits or doesn't fit. because I can look at how it aligns with the bones in the forearm when you have your hand properly positioned. I can have you overlay your trigger finger over the trigger guard, and I can look at the distance in relation to the first knuckle and the trigger face. Are you going to be able to get a 90-degree fit on that trigger, a 90-degree cross on the face of that trigger? Because if you're not, or if you have to, rotate your hand slightly, now the bones are out of alignment in the forearm. In order to get enough pull or pressure on that trigger, get the gun to go bang, then we have a problem. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. And you run a gun shop, you're in a gun store, and you have this down. But it's been my experience in working with gun stores over the years, and is that many of the people who work behind the counter aren't necessarily the person you would really want to ask in terms of details of what gun to have. Well, I want a gun that for concealment, right? Well, sub compacts, and what I call the micros, that's the realm of experts. That's not the realm of a novice. And I have a whole series of, with my training camp, I have a whole series of loaner guns, because someone shows up with something and it is not the tool from which they need to learn, particularly for brand new shooters. I put them in a full-size gun that fits, right? A full-size gun that fits, because I want them to learn the gun. And they're not fighting some of the issues related to the very small guns. Ladies do this. In fact, I semi-jokingly tell ladies in classes, don't let your husband or your boyfriend pick your firearm. Pick what they like. They're going to pick by their feel, the features that they like. They're going to tell you that's the gun for you. And that's not necessarily true. If there were one thing I could do universally, that would in my opinion, dramatically affect new shooters, and particularly females, it would be to train salespeople behind the counter about how to fit a handgun to an individual, and tell them, don't sell them an LCP. Don't sell them a micro pistol at this point. If they've told you they're a relatively new shooter and they want to learn, but they want to carry concealed, right? Then look at the mid-size, have them look at the mid-size guns, and tell them, look, you're on a journey. Carrying concealed is the bachelor's level world of shooting, and we need to get you through elementary school first.
Yeah.
And so and then getting up into the top, and that's the master's world, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort. That journey is not short, and it's not easy.
No, it isn't. It's worthy, and it's worth doing. But the other thing about this is a lot of the objection that I'll get, or I'll hear from people, is, well, I can't use a larger gun. I won't be able to conceal it in any way. And there are little 5'2" bucko
Right.
4 women that come in here and they need the help. And some of these women are very small, and they choose to dress a certain way that makes concealment very hard. I'm like, now hold on a minute. 10 years ago, I've been shopping around some way to figure out how I was going to make this work. But there are so many really good ways to do this now. There's a really good and comfortable manners of concealment that lend themselves to repeatable draw, concealability, all the things that you're looking for. It's not like it was 10 years ago, or even light years different than 20 years ago. We had on a lady, you may know her. She's down in the neighborhood, I think, where you go down there to gun sight. Her name is Paige Rue. She goes by, and she has a line that she's opened up now. We've had her on the show a couple times now, and she was modeling some of this stuff and showing how well it worked. And I'm like, between concealment belly bands, other things like that, fanny packs that are essentially appendix carry, and all the other things that some of these people are offering, I don't think that there's a compelling case to be made for a new shooter to pick up a micro. There's no reason to do it now.
I agree. Well, one of the things to keep in mind, Paige is a good example of this, and that is that she has skills. So, she's not a new shooter. She's got the right stuff. She's built that based on her skill sets, and so, and this is the challenge. From a sales perspective, she can demonstrate any item, and people go, "Yeah, that's it." Well, there were some underlying foundational skills she built first, before she worked it. Another good one in terms of that. Man, I'm losing my mind. John Farnham's wife does a great job of talking with ladies, particularly about off-body carry bags, things, and there are different lines of bags for that. It's, if you're into the defensive world, and we're not just talking pistol. You're in the defensive world. We're not just talking pistol. We're not just talking a firearm. Yeah. But I'll sort of laughingly tell the ladies to come into my classes. Look, you can have long, beautiful fingernails, or you can be a shooter. You can't do both. And man, and they're doing their best to try to balance these, $500 worth of fingernails and paint and so on and so forth, and work the gun, but it doesn't work. Yeah. So there are lifestyle changes. If you're getting into this realm, one of the things we try to convince people of is, look, this is a lifestyle, and we're going to learn to live within the parameters of this world, this space that we're now operating in.
Yeah, I too have seen some stuff that made me go, wait a minute. I don't think that this class is going to work well. Either that, or maybe we're moving into a genuine safety concern with some of the nails that long. I don't know if this is going to work. And I'm not really enthusiastic about being the guy that walks over there and says, listen, I'm sure that you're very happy with how these look, and you waited in line a long time for the appointment to have these put on. But you might as well peel them off now, because this isn't going to work out at all. And people don't want to hear that. But sometimes that's what needs to be said in certain circumstances, especially if they're coming for a class. You're ill-equipped. I wouldn't say yes if you were wearing a pair of flip-flops or some sort of tank top. I wouldn't say yes to that. This is no different.
Nope. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we have very firm rules about what you wear and what you show up with on the range, because you're facilitating this. And that's one of the hard things for people. A couple of 40 years in this game. A couple of the hard things for people to accept is, one, that it's more than the gun, and it's more than a 24-hour class, right? Mm-hmm. That it's a lifestyle, and that to build the skills. One of my favorite books is The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, because Daniel Coyle studied what does it take to become the best, an expert level. What does it take to become the best in the various fields? And he studied everything from music to physical performance. Everything was related to physical performance, but from music to a variety of other things, sports categories, and the amount of years required to develop reasonable skills is pretty high. The magic number, according to his research, the magic number is 10,000 repetitions of a specific thing, right? So, when we talk about his concept of chunking as a learning tool environment, breaking this specific performance from step A to step G into each component, drilling it, and then adding A and B and drilling A and B, then adding C and drilling A, B, and C, then adding D and drilling A, B, C, and D to build this process. And each one of those across that realm, we're talking about 10,000 repetitions, as the magic number to truly produce performance. I think people would begin to understand more the investment they're going to have to make if they really truly want to be skilled.
Yeah.
And then when you start adding all the mental components, when we look at the timeline of an event, of a self-defense event, particularly a firearms event, right? When we look at how that occurs, the actual use of force is the smallest piece in the most compacted amount of time. So what does it take to be able to perform at a high level of skill in order to save your own life or the life of someone you love in that small piece of time? Once people understand the level of skill necessary to truly count on being able to do that. And you and I both, you've seen the videos, and a guy who's a motor moron and idiot, survives a threatening thing. Well, great. But the odds are that the greater the skill, the greater the likelihood of surviving that event.
Now, I'm not advocating for making no changes or imparting any variables into what you do or how you do it. But I do have people come up and they're like, "Oh, you must be a tremendous. Look, what's your everyday carry?" I run a Glock 19 with an RMR on it and a Apex trigger, nothing special. What about sights? I'm like, "Oh, I've just got blacked out tall sights that barely fit in the bottom of the RMR window and nothing special." Well, how long have you run that? I don't know, 12 years. "Oh, you haven't made this change or add these upgrades?" I'm like, "No, I'm pretty handy with this. I'm very comfortable with it. It works fine." And oh, by the way, it's kind of necessary for me to do that, not just from best practices standpoint, but Randy, I might work on one gun a day in my shop and then go out and test it because I live in the country. I literally walk out the door and there's my range, so I can do that. But there are other days I might work on, shoot, and handle maybe 8 or a dozen different handguns. And so what that does for me, that makes me familiar and very, I think the word should choose is familiar. I'm very welcome and familiar with all these different firearms because I have access and I've been exposed to them. But that isn't for 1 minute giving me a false sense of security in that any one of those I could pick up and be proficient with. It doesn't translate like that. So this wider familiarity is good for a knowledge or a database, but it doesn't translate to wisdom with a well-chosen firearm. And so I stick with the one that I've had for a long time. I'm very comfortable with it. It's tried and true. And someday I'll make a change. But right now I'm like, I do well with this. I'm confident with this. And my confidence in terms of, you mentioned the psychological aspect of this, my confidence with this and everything associated with that means a great deal to me. So I'm going to stick with what I've got. And I don't advocate for hopping around from gun to gun.
Yeah, it's not the weapon that counts. It's the amount and the effectiveness of the training. That's the key, right? So if we look at a gunfight, there are 3 critical tasks to a gunfight. Now, this is what we're going to pattern a whole training program around, your whole personal individual training program, right? Critical task number 1 is to make correct and in-time shooting decisions. That's number 1. That's the first thing, right? Make correct shooting decisions. And in time. What do I mean? Correct means it's legal, ethical, and moral based on the situation. And if in your training, you are not literally, and I recommend people memorize the use of force laws. So that the process it takes to memorization is going to create this assessment tool in the brain about whether or not in the heat of a very compacted decision cycle, whether or not this meets the legal criteria in my state to bring that gun out, because a gun doesn't come out until a gun can legally come out, right? And then the employment of it. And when I say in time, make correct and in time shooting decisions. In times means that I'm skilled enough in that decision-making cycle that I can employ it in rapid enough fashion and reach the appropriate response fast enough to hopefully save my life or the life of the person that I'm attempting to protect. If it takes too long to cycle, process, evaluate, analyze, assess, and reach a decision, it's too late.
Yeah.
So our training program starts with, well, that's critical task number one, and they're in order for a reason. Critical task number one is make correct and in-time shooting decisions. Critical task number two is deliver timely and accurate rounds on target, sufficient to end the threat, and no more than are necessary. And okay, so there's a whole training curriculum right there, right? Deliver timely and accurate. Timely means with some alacrity, that there's a speed component. Now, a speed component is going to be relative to the situation, but with some skill, I can get on target, and I can hold the sights on target through a trigger press and deliberately place a round, which is harder to do than people realize. I was in a number of shooting situations in my law enforcement career, and quite a bit of downrange combat, and I've never shot anybody or shot at anybody who ever stood perfectly still. And it's one of the fallacies of it. It's hard to adjust or change, and we do some things in my training programs, right? I mean, if your sight is right here on my zipper, and you hit me the first time, and I do this, which is a natural human response, I curl inward. Now, where's your sight, right?
Yeah.
Well, you got to pull it back down. Right. So we do something called on-target sight transitions, where we're moving the sight around the target based on a series of things because the person is reacting to the impact or reacting to the event. And then we have target-to-target transitions for a reason, because our sight comes off target. The person moves. Now we have to take the sight back over before we press the trigger. If we're just drawing and pressing the trigger repeatedly, we're going to have a hard time maintaining accuracy, and we care about every the barrel, right? Because you're going to have, as one of my friends says, you're going to have one of two things. You're going to have an intentional hit or an unintentional hit, but the bullet's going to hit something. It's going to go downrange and hit something. We want to hit what we intend it to hit. So deliver timely and accurate rounds on target, sufficient to end the threat. In other words, the ability to analyze as we shoot to when the threat is resolved. I'm working on a case right now where, on a law enforcement case, some shots were delivered, and they're still fast, and I think it's defensible, but in this day of juries, it's harder, much harder than it was 10 years ago, where the last three shots delivered by two police officers, the suspect's gun was already on the ground, but you're talking about a very compacted time frame of not quite. It's just a little over 2 seconds, which is a long time, but not a long time, right? So you got to make the case. I have to convince, and the good thing is we have people like Force Science Institute and others.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say Force Science. Go ahead.
Right, who understand the dynamics of how the brain works, and then guys like me can explain it. And hopefully convince and sway juries, but that they understand that. But here's the downside. The downside is the body camera footage is going to be played and slowed down numerous times by the plaintiff's attorney, and the jury's going to see the gun is on the ground when the person is still reacting to some impact from rounds. So that's hard. It's harder today than it would have been. When I first started in law enforcement, the first 20 years in law enforcement, the public supported us automatically. Law enforcement, hey, you shouldn't have been doing what you're doing. The cop shot you 26 times. You shouldn't have been doing what you were doing. It's a different world today, right? So number one is make correct in-time shooting decisions. Number two is deliver timely and accurate rounds on target, sufficient to end the threat, and no more than are necessary. And then number three, part of our training program is keep the gun in the fight. Things happen. Be able to do an emergency reload or a slide lock reload, right? Be able to do a type 1 or type 2 malfunction clear. Type 3 is a little tougher animal, particularly in the time frame of gunfight. But type 1 or 2 are the most common, right? And so be able to do those things. So if we build our training program around those three critical tasks for a gunfight, number one, make correct and in-time shooting decisions. Number two, deliver time and accurate rounds on target, sufficient to end the threat, and no more than are necessary. And then critical task number three, keep the gun in the fight. If you focus around those three things, you're going to come out of there with high skills. And you're going to have a greater odds of prevailing. It's never perfect, and there's no guarantees, but you're going to have greater odds of prevailing when a situation goes to that level.
Okay, I think that this is a good time for people who are watching, for people who are listening. I want you to go to warriorcreed.us. For those of you watching, same thing. You'll see it on the screen here. So you've mentioned a few times what we teach, and you have spoken with in that way. So walk us through what Warrior Creed is. How does somebody get involved with this level of training? Where can you be found? And a little
Mhm.
about your instructors. And to be honest with you, Randy, I'm admittedly curious what made you want to start the company. So let's go through some of that.
Yeah, so warriorcreed.us is the civilian firearms training side of my company, SRW Incorporated. SRW Incorporated is srwinc.us. That's very specialized stuff based on extensive special operations, military and law enforcement background. A lot of stuff over there. That's the contract stuff that we do. And I have a number of people that provide expertise. If somebody calls us and says, we're looking for this or that, what can you do for us? I can reach out across this network of people that I've worked with or served in combat with or done a number of things with and do it. Warrior Creed came about because, and this is going to, let me start out with, for the first lot of years in law enforcement, probably a dozen years in law enforcement, I was your typical law enforcement guy who said, look, civilians have no need to know the things and have the skills that we have. But then over that first dozen to 15 years in law enforcement, I saw enough situations. It was a very active city. I saw enough situations to say, man, if that person only had a gun, if that person had only, understood situational awareness, if that person had only, right, there'd have been a different outcome, because the outcome isn't one that we wanted, right? And then I began to understand, as a result of that, I began studying to understand the Second Amendment. And I began to see the wisdom in our founding fathers and the Second Amendment. And I said, look, and then further along, I said, look, I have a great military career. I'm doing all kinds of things I want to do. I have a great law enforcement career. I'm doing all kinds of things I want to do. Taxpayer paid for me. Why shouldn't they get back some of what they've prepared me to do? How can I help the average individual? And I went on staff at Gunsight. Like I said, I went through their program, which is a challenging program to become an instructor there. You don't get to ask to be instructor there. They ask you. It's kind of like the concept of the SEALs Green Team. They watch a bunch of people who've come to their classes and they look for stuff. So I built a business model around, I looked at what was in my area, and I looked at the range and the type of things that we had available here, which is a state-of-the-art range. It's owned by the county and run by Parks and Rec. And I said, look, what would fit? And so my business model locally here is 1 day, all day Saturday classes, and each one builds on the next. And then there are Tuesday evening classes that are very specialized. We take a specific piece of shooting skills and we do those things. We do everything from, defensive pistol, practical pistol proficiency, which is a baseline course, and then defensive pistol basic, defensive pistol intermediate, defensive pistol advanced. And it's this curriculum so that by that time you're into this thing, 40 hours. We do the same thing with carbine. We do specialized classes like fighting to your firearm, because you and I both know that in a close quarters construct that I may very well need to be utilizing my hands to build space and time before I can get to my firearm. We do gunfighting in and around vehicles. We do a couple safety seminar, which is where one person is carrying and the other person is there with the and we're out. How does my spouse not become part of the problem? If something happens, what does my spouse do? What are the steps they take? What are the things that they don't do so that I can focus on solving the problem and those types of things. And then I travel a bit occasionally. Those are specialized classes. And then the rest of the time you can find me. I don't do the 250, the basic pistol at Gunsight. I do the intermediate and advanced pistol, plus I do the specialized courses, ballistic response against violent encounters, the BRAVE course, which is an incredible tactical course, advanced carbine applications at Gunsight, which is those kinds of things. But Warrior Creed here in Ogden, Utah, that's what we do. And it's more of a local audience within 100, 150 miles that comes and attends here. The people that teach for me have gone through a very structured instructor program, and they all have very, very specific skills and have backgrounds in specific skills. So that's Warrior Creed, and that's what it does. We do about 30, 40 classes a year here in Ogden, Utah. And we're also a partner, by the way. We're a partner entity with USCCA.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because that's promoted a little bit on the side, or at least it's mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So again, back to a question I asked earlier, and I'm not sure that you answered it. So if you'll indulge me, what
Sure.
made you want to erect this business? Because it sounds to me like you were plenty gainfully employed in other avenues. So was this about wanting to get back to the individual, or what?
Yeah, I wanted to give people back some of what they had allowed me to build. And I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people who wanted to exercise their Second Amendment rights and privileges. I wanted them to have skills. I wanted them to have the opportunity to have skills, because I think that's important. A huge percentage, and I personally believe it's 98% of those who carry concealed truly lack the skills to be as effective as they might need to be. And I'm not denigrating them. I'm just saying. True. So I wanted to create a laboratory where they could develop those kinds of skills. Home defense carbines, home defense shotguns, those kinds, same kind of thing. The world's not getting better, right? And so this is what I wanted to do, and I wanted to share.
I like that. That's fantastic. It's a different philosophy, or somewhat different philosophy. Well, let me back up. I didn't come out right. One of the things that you said is resonating with me because I don't remember having heard it from anybody else. You said, in no uncertain terms, the taxpayers, the collective, if you will, had invested in you to build you up with skills and characteristics and forethought and training, and so that it would translate into application, well done application, into performance. And now you're saying, I'm paying Joe and Jane taxpayer back in some way for their investment in me. Randy, that's absolutely poetic. I love that idea. I don't think that I've ever thought about that or approached it. And to be honest, very few new concepts get sprung on me. So I really appreciate having heard that. And I'm going to think about that quite a little bit. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. And what you'll find is Utah's a gun culture, and there are a lot of instructors here and so on. And I don't quite know how to put this way, other than to say that for instruction at the level that we offer, we're below market price, and that's deliberate. I'm trying to price it in such a way that the company can be effective, but also that more people can have the opportunity to attend our training.
Fantastic. I like the sound of that. So is it what's the average class size? Are you trying to hit certain numbers, or what kind of ratio are you comfortable with?
Well, because of the range facility and the cost of the range facility that I lease, I have to have a certain number. So I have to have a minimum number of 8 people. And then we set a maximum number, depending on the class, we set a maximum number of 16 to 20, depending on what the class is. And then, as that number goes up, then more instructors get brought in, so it's more expensive. So that's the numbering. You know how business works. Yeah. So that's essentially what it is. And as long as the company is paying the bills and makes money. Look, I have 2 retirements, right? I have a military retirement, I have a law enforcement retirement, and so I'm fortunate. I'm blessed because of the taxpayer to be able to do that. And so we're able to, to offer some things into it. The other side of the company, for instance, Thursday I fly to Wisconsin. There's a church that has about a 5,000 member congregation that they have an armed response team, but they want to fine tune their skills, and they want to improve their processes. So I'm going to spend 2 days with them, not on range. It's all about the security rings, the overlapping context of security for their facility, and then how they respond, how they get the fastest response to an effect. Those are the kinds of specialized skills that we do. Right? I just got picked up by a Fortune 500 back on the East Coast to review all of their active shooter protocols. The company got picked up, me, but I'll send a team of guys out to review their active shooter process protocols and look at their rings of security, collapsing rings of security in terms of those three primary areas: personnel, activities, physical structures and barriers and obstacles, and technology, how those overlapping rings work in terms of security. Same thing that we did at the Olympic Games here in 2002. My city had a couple of venues. I was SWAT commander at the time, and I was co-chair of the tactical subcommittee for the Olympics. So I spent 3 years studying and preparing and getting ready. And then along comes 9/11, and I'm in Afghanistan within a month and a half, and I wasn't here for the Olympics. So, but we had a very, very good Olympics, and we had very, very good tactical teams ready and prepared to deal with anything. And we had done tremendous site surveys, and we knew everything about every location and every locale. So the same principles my company is able to put together with skilled people and go and review different things. So there's a wide variety of skills that we offer through SRW Inc. And then Warrior Creed is again just the civilian firearm side.
Getting ready for
we still do quite a bit of law enforcement and military special operations units. I just don't discuss that.
Giddy, you mentioned the Olympics and preparing for that to be in town. That sounds like and if any of the listeners out here, anybody watching, hasn't been in a city during an Olympics event, it's unbelievable. I mean, it is, you can barely fathom it. And so what you're describing, I don't even know what that would be like to say, okay, we're going to be prepared in terms of prevention, and we're going to be prepared in terms of response for all these different potential calamities or whatever else. That sounds like an absolutely monumental task.
It is.
You've won my admiration, Randy, believe me.
Yeah. So I did the same thing. I was part of a team that went down to Brazil in 2005, and we trained the leadership, a lot of leadership. We trained the leadership of the Brazilian counterterrorism police to prepare to protect the 2007 Pan Am Games in Rio. And you're talking about an environment that is fraught with high levels of criminality, violent crime, and as well as terrorism, because you had the tri-border region not far from there, and terrorism, that's my world. And so, it was, when you're down there and in order to go to a place to review a venue, you have to go in an armed cavalcade in an armored vehicle in a city. And you think about what preparing for those events, these major world events that are going to come into that area, what that must look like. It's a monumental event, and it takes years to get ready. And Utah's looking at the 2034 games, winter games here. We have them, they're coming. And so those, we're, how many years out yet, right? 8 years out, and it's already started. The processes have already started to begin figuring out all of those things necessary, including security. With this thing will start, and within 3 years prior to the games, it will really get in depth and detailed. But that's enough years out that I will be very, very much retired, and I'll watch it from a distance. I'm not big on crowds.
Okay. Well, we've talked about a lot. We've bitten off the large end of the hot dog here. If you're okay with it, what I'd like to do as we wrap up, I would like for you, I mean, what you're doing, what you've been trained to do, what you're training others to do, how you're collaborating is not for the faint of heart. But you're also telling me that you're taking rookies and building them up. So knowing, like
Right.
you said, 98% of people who may be carrying are either ill-advised or ill-equipped to do this to the best of their potential ability. I happen to agree with you, by the way. So what can we do for the other 90%? What do they need to hear from you while we have you here? What do those 98% of people need to hear from you that will help or motivate them into a better level of engagement? What do those people need to hear?
I'm going to go back to Jeff Cooper.
Okay.
Man, I admire, respect, and think very highly of. He passed away. If you haven't, Jeff Cooper, people don't understand that Jeff Cooper, besides being brilliant, he was a scholar, Stanford scholar. Besides being a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel with a good deal of combat experience, World War II, Korea, in that realm. He was a very prolific writer, a very good writer, and a whole number of books, everything from the Bible, his Principles of Personal Defense, which every person who's thinking of carrying a firearm should have. It's not very thick. You can get it at Pro Sight Gun Shop. You can go online, gunsite.com, go to the Gunsite Pro Shop. Every person who's carrying a firearm should have and should read and should highlight. It should be highlighted and dog-eared. Is Jeff Cooper's Principles of Personal Defense. And then if I had my way, every high school student, 11th, 12th grade, would read his book, To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. Very empowering, a series of stories. But I'm going to go back to something he said, and this is what I would tell, and I hope it would trigger a response. This is what I tell every shooter. Jeff Cooper said this years and years ago. This is what he said. Owning a guitar doesn't make you a musician, right? And just simply carrying a gun doesn't make you a gunfighter, right? They require an investment of time and resources to reach certain levels of skills. And if you are not reaching certain levels of performance-based skill, right, then you are first selling yourself short, but second, you are putting yourself in a position to let yourself and the people you love down in a time of an intense event. And I would hope that would never happen to you, because it's very hard to live with. I know people that have to live with that, and it is not very enjoyable for them.
Well, that's to the point and very poignant. I was led a men's ministry class the other day, just a couple of days ago, and we were talking about discipleship, Randy, and its importance. And I read a quote from a lady who had been working in the mission field and had reached another young lady, and she came to Christ and was talking about these things, and then she was very sad. And the mission worker asked her, "Why are you so upset? You've realized your Savior, whatever else." And she said, "I really wish that I'd met you 2 weeks ago, because 2 weeks ago I sacrificed my child in our tribe to our local gods." And I did said that to my fellow men in the ministry, not to guilt them in any way, but to tell them, listen, you've got tremendous potential out here to do these things. Don't shy away from it, because look at what may be on the line. And that wasn't a swipe at the lady in the mission field. She had been there and spent time whatever else. But how great could it have been if they'd reached one another sooner? And so it's no different than what you're saying. If you've got the availability, then really what you've got is the responsibility. So follow through with it. I like that.
So we, let me close, if you don't mind, let me close with the One Warrior's Creed, because that's where Warrior Creed comes from. In 2006 and 7, I was in Baghdad. I was the counterterrorism advisor to the Iraqi National Counterterrorism Unit, Lieutenant Colonel, Green Beret, Lieutenant Colonel, and we lost several of our team during that time. Baghdad 0607, really tough time to be there. 50, 60 Americans being killed a month, 700 IEDs a day, and the war was not being run well. Leadership was, in my opinion, sacrificing service members on the altar of not just political correctness, but of failed diplomacy. And so, coming out of there, when we lost the last guy just before I rotated out, a young lady from the State Department asked a question, and she said, when we were at his memorial service, she said, why do you guys do this? And so I thought back to, all those years in SWAT and specialized units and all the guys I knew who dedicated themselves to this. I thought about all the SEALs I'd worked with, all the Green Berets, all the, some of the Delta guys that I'd worked with and been on ops with and different things. And I thought, how would I describe us and how would I put that? And then how would I generate that as a message of what you need to become if you're going to be in this realm? And that's where the one warrior's creed comes from. And it goes like this: if today is to be the day, so be it. If you seek to do battle with me this day, you will receive the best that I'm capable of giving. It may not be enough, but it will be everything that I have to give, and it will be impressive, for I've constantly prepared myself for this day. I have trained, drilled, and rehearsed my actions so that I might have the best chance of defeating you. I have kept myself in peak physical condition, schooled myself in the martial skills, and become proficient in the application of combat tactics. You may defeat me, but you will pay a severe price and be lucky to escape with your life. You may kill me, but I'm willing to die if necessary. I do not fear death, for I've been close enough to it on enough occasions that it no longer concerns me. But I do fear the loss of my honor and would rather die fighting than to ever have it said that I was without courage. So I will fight you, no matter how insurmountable it may seem, and to the death if need be, in order that it may never be said of me that I was not a warrior. And, if you go to One Warrior's Creed, that creed is there, but there's also part of that page is an explanation of what each part of that means and why we wrote it. It's called A Philosophy to Live With. And so that if more people who want to be prepared, could take that concept to heart, it would change their lives. It would change how they live, right? It would change how they live. It would change how they impart their resources and the kinds of things that they would do in order to be capable. That old saying, we are our own first responder. I can vouch for that. And I think that, if you look across the history of time, those of us that have been prepared make up less than 3% of the population at any given time when it's time to go to war, when it's time to defend what we stand for and what this nation is. Less than 3% have ever done that. So if a person decides that they want to enter that realm, then this is the kind of thing I think that would help them understand where they're going.
Fantastic. Thank you. With that, again, Randy Watt, you'll find him primarily through warriorscreed.us. Thank you a lot for your time today. Thank you. Many thanks for your service and dedication. And seriously, thank you for reminding me that when the taxpayers invest in us as individuals, we have a moral and ethical obligation to visit them back. I absolutely loved that component of what you mentioned today. It was new to me, and I'll give a lot of thought to that. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you.
See you, Randy. Thank you.